Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
You're listening to the One Pridecast. Hello and welcome into another episode of the One Pridecast presented by MGM Grand Detroit. I'm Tori Petry and I am coming to you today from Senior Bowl practice down here in Mobile, Alabama, where our Senior Bowl coverage is brought to you by Southeast Michigan Ford Dealers. I am joined today, sitting here in Mobile, Alabama, by Matt Miller of the Draft Scout. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. And for those who aren't down here with us, this is the nicest day I've ever seen in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. So I know, for me, being a Missouri guy, it snowed last night. I'm sure you guys in Detroit, it's freezing.
Oh, yeah.
So we're being spoiled for sure this year.
I'm not complaining about it. It's supposed to be a little chillier tomorrow, but, the people that are back in Detroit listening to this podcast don't feel sorry for us at all.
55 for people in Detroit is a balmy summer day.
Exactly. Well, it's been really nice out here at the Senior Bowl. Thought we might get rained out a day or two this week, but we did not. You guys might hear a little bit of the wind going on, a little bit of the chirping in practice back there, but it's definitely good to be out here. And Matt, I don't even know where to start with Lions news this year because there have been so many pieces of breaking news throughout the last couple of days, considering the Lions are totally rebuilding their staff right now. So I guess we'll start with the GM position. The Lions hire Brad Holmes from the LA Rams. What did you think of that hire?
Yeah, I liked it. And I think it signals more, when you hire a GM, that you can almost go a couple different ways. And it's either you go with the guy who's a proven scout, or you go with a salary cap hire, or you might go, with the former player like a John Lynch, or a media hire like a Mike Mayock. But for the Lions, it signaled to me that they really want to build this team through the draft, that they want to scout and evaluate college players. And, Brad Holmes has a great reputation as a scout coming from the Rams. And I think a lot of Lions fans would, go look at the draft history of the Rams. They haven't had a lot of first-round picks because they've traded for key players like Jalen Ramsey. But it's what they've done outside of the first round has been really impressive. So I think that's something that you would feel really good about, is the fact that you're getting someone who is a proven scout. And so you can come to events like this and find those diamonds in the rough a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, they also brought in Dan Campbell to be their new head coach. It was the press conference heard around the world.
That's all anyone's talked about.
Exactly. Yeah. But, I was in the room for that press conference, and locally in Detroit, it was so well received. They loved hearing his energy and everything that he brought to the table. And then we've seen him build his staff throughout the last couple of days here. What did you think of Dan Campbell stepping in as the new Lions head coach?
Yeah, the press conference was amazing, first and foremost. You're right. I've never, ever worried about my kneecap being bitten, but now I have to be aware of that. So Dan Campbell had actually been on my list for probably 3 years of future head coach candidates. So just the success that they had in New Orleans, and then the fact that he has, coached so many different positions. And as a former tight end, something to think about when you're a tight end, you have to know how to block. You also have to know how to run routes and catch. So you're really learning two positions. You're an offensive lineman and you're a wide receiver. So tight ends usually can move between those rooms a little bit. And so sometimes they're better communicating with players. I think that's why a lot of really good NFL coaches have either coached tight end or played that position. So, and then, of course, just the lineage of Dan Campbell, being under Sean Payton, being under Bill Parcells. There's some great coaches to be connected to. So I think that's another thing to be excited about. Not only the energy, the credibility that he brings, but I think it matches well with kind of the identity of that city and that team of this is going to be a tough football team. It's going to be a little bit of a throwback, but then there's going to be that element of the Saints are a high-octane offense. So you're going to try to get playmakers who can create with the ball in their hands.
Sure. Well, I think it's super interesting that you say that you had your eye on him as somebody who was a future head coach, because for some people, they were a bit surprised because he hadn't been a coordinator before, hadn't called the plays at his NFL stops before. Do you think that matters at all?
I don't. I know so many people are talking about that this year of, guys didn't call plays. They weren't a play caller. But when you're a head coach, you're not always a play caller. Bill Belichick doesn't call plays. He's doing okay, And so I think it's just a matter of how do you want your structure to be. And if you can build out a very good staff, which I think that's another thing with Dan Campbell, being part of that Sean Payton coaching tree, you're going to be able to assemble a really good staff of people who can call those plays.
Sure.
Normally, a head coach, you want to hire that guy to be the CEO of your team, to be the face of the team, to set really the pace for your, the culture, the way things are going to be run. And I think that's what Dan Campbell brings is, like Matt Rule, whose staff is down here coaching right now. He's not an X's and O's guy, but he's a great culture builder. He's a good CEO, and I think Dan Campbell is going to be very, very similar to that.
Okay, speaking of the staff that they are building, we'll talk about the coaching staff first of all. All 3 coordinators in place at this point. You've got Aaron Glenn as your defensive coordinator. Anthony Lynn comes in after leaving the Chargers as your offensive coordinator, and Dave Phipp is your special teams coordinator. What stands out there, and what do you think of that staff?
Well, the experience is huge, and I think for a first-time head coach, and as you mentioned, somebody who has not called plays, he's been under a very hands-on head coach, to get that support, especially with Anthony Lynn, freshly coming off a head coaching job.
Sure.
He knows what it's going to take to run an organization. He'll be able to help with that. And then I think also, with Detroit last year, one of the draft picks that everybody was so excited about, Jeff Okudah, and then you get a former NFL defensive back in Aaron Glenn to work with him. And then in the second round, you get DeAndre Swift, and you get a former NFL running backs coach to work with him and Anthony Lynn. So it really connects well to some of the young superstars on the team.
Yeah, great point.
A lot's going to change there at quarterback, obviously, now.
Yeah.
But
we haven't even gotten to that part yet.
We're not even there right now. But you have coaches who are going to work really well with what you would consider foundational draft picks from last year. So I think that's a really good sign of the fact that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes know what they're doing to get the right coaches in place to help those players.
Absolutely. And then you add a couple of pieces on the scouting side of things, a couple of big names in Ray Agnew and John Dorsey. I mean, John Dorsey, a former GM for 2 different NFL teams, he comes in and joins that front office. To me, it seems like a really helpful thing for a first-time GM to have such experience in that office with him.
Yeah, and for John Dorsey, he gets to walk around and remind people that he drafted Patrick Mahomes. So that helps, right? When you can say, I was the guy who did that, that does help. I think just that experience is, again, huge. Brad, you being a bit of a younger guy and not having that experience at the top of an organization, now you get 2 people who have been, at the top or near the top.
Sure.
And so I think they've done a great job of almost backfilling these positions with, like we were saying with the coaching staff. John Dorsey has been everywhere. He's seen it all, from being in Green Bay and working under, that staff there with Ted Thompson, going to Kansas City, going to Cleveland. I mean, and at each stop, even though they didn't work out for him, I mean, he turned those rosters around. I mean, the Browns won 10 games this year, that for the first time in forever.
Largely from his work.
Right, and the Chiefs are pretty good as well, right? So I think that's something while, John has, obviously he was available for a reason, but the rosters that he helped build in those 2 places are really, really strong.
Absolutely, and it definitely is interesting. You have a guy like Chris Spielman that is advising the owner and the team president, and then you have Ray Agnew and you have John Dorsey. And you have all these voices that are in there that are experienced to help out a first-time head coach and first-time GM because they've got one of this organization's biggest decisions ahead of them. Because, as we know, over the last week, the Lions have said that they and Matthew Stafford will mutually be seeking to part ways this offseason. And, I mean, choosing what you're going to do at quarterback if you part ways with Matthew Stafford is a huge decision and a huge responsibility for a first-time head coach and first-time GM, but you do have a lot of really experienced voices in that room with you.
And a lot of former players in that list that we ran through, and guys who know what they're looking for in terms of not just on-field ability from this quarterback class, but also what type of leader they want. Because Matthew Stafford, being a former number 1 overall pick, he was a great representative for that organization, and I think that's the other side of it. Getting someone that can be your face, that can be, like we said, the Patrick Mahomes, that John Dorsey got in Kansas City. So I think that's a huge part of it. And I know Lions fans are probably looking at every mock draft they can. This is a good quarterback class, especially to have right now the number 7 pick. It's a good year to need a quarterback.
All right, well, now that we've talked all of the front office and coaching staff and all that, let's dive into this draft because I know that is your area of expertise. I mean, you talk about this being a good quarterback draft. So do you see the Lions filling that quarterback role in this year's draft?
I think so right now. It's hard to say before free agency,
Sure.
but that makes the most sense. To me, I don't think you would go ahead and announce that you're going to mutually, part ways with Matthew Stafford and really open the door to a potential trade without knowing that you have an idea of how you want to replace him. And having a top 10 pick is a huge part of that. I think if the Lions were, drafting at 18, it might be a different conversation. But because they're at 7, you would think that, okay, one of those 4 quarterbacks will be on the board at this point. Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, Zach Wilson from BYU, Justin Fields at Ohio State, and then Trey Lance at North Dakota State. None of those guys are down here, as 3 of them weren't eligible. But it is a good year to be in a spot to get one of those quarterbacks. Or if you're able to move Stafford and get enough picks in return, there's that possibility to trade up even farther, to maybe get even more of a premier prospect at that position.
All right, so let's say Trevor Lawrence goes to the Jags and you have your pick of the other three. Which one is your favorite of those guys?
Yeah, this sounds like a hedge. I like them all. I really do. They all provide something unique that makes them, good. Zach Wilson is, an electric thrower. He makes a lot of, uncharacteristic plays. Everything's off platform. He's energetic. He's a little bit wild almost, but it works. With Justin Fields, he has everything that you want. It's the big arm, the athleticism, the production over 2 years at Ohio State. I mean, he was arguably the best quarterback in college the last 2 years. So there's a lot of experience there that you're not going to get from Trey Lance or Zach Wilson against Big Ten defenses. With Trey Lance, this year he only played one game, and it was kind of thrown together late, so it's hard to even evaluate. But last year, he threw 28 touchdowns, rushed for 14, and didn't throw an interception. So he was fantastic. I mean, but again, at North Dakota State. So you're like, well, who has he played? So you really have to dig into the traits of those guys and evaluate them. If it were me sitting in that room, I would advocate for Zach Wilson. I just think his style of play fits what the NFL is moving to right now in terms of that ability to create on the move as well. Bucky Brooks from NFL Network said this perfectly, that you want scorers, not shooters. And Zach Wilson's a scorer. So whether it's with his legs or his arm, he can find a way to get into the end zone.
Well, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about Dan Campbell, you called it maybe a throwback offense, but also with some influence from the New Orleans Saints and the explosive offense that they've had there. So which of those quarterbacks do you feel like fits with what Dan Campbell will probably be doing along with Anthony Lynn?
I think the great news for Lions fans is that all three are athletic. And so if you want to do a lot of the Drew Brees, half rollouts, quarter rollouts, you can do that. You can play with any of these quarterbacks on the move. I do think Zach Wilson is the best fit for that just because of what he was asked to do at BYU.
Okay.
In terms of the play broke down, he was able to move. And what we're seeing in the league right now, it's not just that guys can roll out, but they can drift away from the line of scrimmage. They can extend the play by going side to side or backward. And he does that exceptionally well and then has a strong enough arm to get out of those, when he has to reverse his field a little bit. But if he's not available and you're there with Justin Fields or Trey Lance, those are not consolation prizes. Those are really good quarterbacks that you can build around. And I think with Justin Fields, especially being the biggest name, obviously, folks in Michigan have seen him play for a couple of years at Ohio State. It could be a Justin Herbert situation where when he gets in the NFL and he's able to loosen up a little bit and just throw the ball, that he could, break out and have a huge productive rookie year.
BetMGM, an official partner of the Detroit Lions, is coming soon to Michigan. But you can sign up early and get $100 in free sports bets and $100 in free casino bets with bonus code LIONS. Be ready for the action the moment BetMGM goes live. Download the app or go to BetMGM.com to get a total of $200 in free bets with bonus code LIONS. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help. Excludes Michigan disassociated persons.
Okay, well, say they don't take a quarterback at 7. There's a lot of quarterbacks here at the Senior Bowl this week who, a lot of people have their eyes on. Mac Jones at the top of that list. What do you think of the quarterback class that's down here in Mobile?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a down year outside of those top 4 or 5 quarterbacks. You mentioned Mac Jones, and he's someone who it's really interesting to evaluate this week because you go to an all-star game and his supporting cast here is actually worse than it was at Alabama, which isn't a knock on these guys. Alabama's just crazy.
Exactly.
So 4 first-round wide receivers last year, a first-round running back, an offensive line that's amazing. So really trying to see what he looks like outside of that system. He's not the biggest player. He's not the most athletic player, and his arm, it doesn't just wow you, but he's very, very consistent. He's very accurate. He throws a very pretty deep ball. So he would be at the top of that list. The other guys are what I would consider developmental quarterbacks who might have a trait or two that you really like, but they haven't put it together consistently enough to feel like they're viable starters, at least early on.
Okay, well, let's talk about the other positions that the Lions might have their eyes on. Obviously, they've got a lot of work to do with their roster. Brad Holmes said he'd prefer to call it a retool rather than a rebuild. What other position groups could you see the Lions targeting as far as the first round goes in this draft?
Yeah, I think wide receiver is a really interesting position if they don't come off the board too early because Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner at Alabama, Jamar Chase from LSU, who had 20 touchdowns in 2019 before he opted out, and then Jalen Waddle, also at Alabama. One of those 3 could still be there. They're all very, very talented and are expected to go early, but they're each very different. Devontae Smith is more like Justin Jefferson, just a great route runner with good hands. Jalen Waddle is a little bit more Tyreek Hill, just speed all over the field. And then Jamar Chase is just physically gifted at 208 pounds. He just out-muscles people for the ball, and then he's athletic enough to create after the fact. So depending on what happens with Kenny Golladay in free agency, I think that need could be elevated a little bit more.
Sure.
But it is definitely something where that's an area that has to get a little bit better.
Well, I mean, the Lions only have two wide receivers under contract for this following year, so it's definitely a position of need for them. But how about on defense? What do they do to improve that defense from where they were at last year?
Yeah, I think something that's missing is people who can create turnovers. You know, you lose Darius Slay, you lose Quandre Diggs. That has to be replaced, not just on the field, but even in terms of leadership. So looking at this safety class, it's very, very talented, whether that's at the Senior Bowl or overall. It's a good year to need a safety. So if you're looking at ways to increase, your playmakers on the back end, I think the safety class is really intriguing. I mean, in round 2 and round 3, there's so much depth this year that could just be a spot where it might not be the most obvious need, but something that I do think would be an area where you can get great value. I'm still a huge believer in Jeff Okudah at corner. Getting someone opposite him could definitely be an area of focus early, but if you're going on defense, I know, D-line is always going to be where the attraction is with those players, and we'll see what Aaron Glenn wants to do defensively, but I think some of the moves made, over the past 2 years in free agency have bolstered the front four that you don't have to feel like you have to get a player there at least.
Okay. Now, we're sitting out here at practice in Mobile. Which players are exciting you the most from what you've seen so far down here in Alabama?
Yeah, so Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver from Florida, has been phenomenal, as has Dwayne Eskridge.
I like that pick from Florida. Yeah. I'm a Florida grad myself.
Okay, there we go. So, I mean, two just really electric wide receivers.
Yeah.
Great speed, and that's what tends to stand out here. It's people who have the burst of athleticism. I like the offensive line class. James Hudson, a tackle from Cincinnati, has been very, very good. And then there's a pass rusher from Pitt, Patrick Jones, who might be a target for a team like the Lions in the second round, has been really impressive as well.
Eskridge has really turned a lot of heads this week, because you come from a smaller school like that in the MAC, and then you come down here to the Senior Bowl. It's guys like that who really benefit at the Senior Bowl.
Absolutely. It gets you on a level playing field. No matter where you went to school, you are competing just, best against the best. And so that's why it is so valuable, because you can watch, a Western Michigan or North Dakota State player, and they look amazing against that level. But getting them down here, watching them go against Florida and Alabama and Ohio State players, it gives you a different level of respect for what they do. And also, there's no substitute for seeing a player in person. To really see the arm strength, the speed, the agility, that's such a huge part of this.
All right, well, the NFL draft is still a couple of months away, so it's very early. We haven't even been through free agency yet. We don't know exactly what's happening with Matthew Stafford, but at the number 7 pick in the draft, this very early prediction, what would you say the most likely thing is that the Lions do?
Yeah, I would say as of right now, it would be quarterback. And to put a name on it, I think Justin Fields would be a great fit and someone who's likely to be available. You want Trevor Lawrence, right? Everybody does. He will be gone. I think there's a great chance that Zach Wilson is gone. So next best quarterback for me, it would be Justin Fields. And I think that's a great pick. In a normal draft, Justin Fields might be a top 2 pick. This year's just a little bit unique with Trevor Lawrence up there and the rise of Zach Wilson. But that's a really good quarterback to start your new regime around. What
do you think fair market value is for Matthew Stafford? What do you think they can get?
That's the question everybody wants the answer to right now. I think, given how talented Matthew is, the fact that he's still relatively young at the position, and his contract it's not crazy. It's not unrealistic money. I would think you start with a first-round pick and maybe a third as well, and that's what the Lions could hope to get, especially from teams like San Francisco, Indianapolis, Washington, New England, teams that are probably on the outside looking in this quarterback class. A proven veteran like Matthew Stafford is very valuable.
Okay, so say you have 2 picks in the first round. You take a quarterback with one of them. What position do you think is most important for the Lions to do next?
I would come back at wide receiver like we talked about before, with just 2 guys under roster. Whether Kenny Galladay's back next year or not, more speed, more playmakers at the position. So I would pick Kadarius Toney, mostly just to keep you happy with a Gator there. But
I like it.
He's one of my favorite players in this class. And so I do think, especially if you're picking in the 20s, that's where his value's at.
Okay. Well, Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with me on the podcast today. You did it a couple years ago for us at the Senior Bowl as well. But I want people to know where they can find you now.
Yeah, it's weird to not hear Bleacher Report after my name.
I know.
After 10 years there, it's a little bit of a change. But I've decided to go out on my own and launch a new draft website called thedraftscout.com. Officially launches February 11th with a 7-round mock draft. Top 300 big board, and so coming out hot, and I haven't been able to write in about 2 months, and I really miss it, and so I'm ready to go. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Okay, well, we will be tuned in on February 11th. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the One Pridecast presented by MGM Grand Detroit.
Awesome, thank you.
BetMGM, an official partner of the Detroit Lions, is coming soon to Michigan. But you can sign up early and get $100 in free sports bets and $100 in free casino bets with bonus code LIONS. Be ready for the action the moment BetMGM goes live. Download the app or go to BetMGM.com to get a total of $200 in free bets with bonus code LIONS. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help. Excludes Michigan disassociated persons.